Okay, so is the Congress then willing to yield ground? Let's take it straight to our big policy news break that we promised you. And Supriya is joining in live from our New Delhi newsroom for that. Supriya, off late and especially this week, there seems to be this sense that there's more consensus now with GST than ever before. Tell us what you're picking up first from the Congress's point of view.
So yes, there is a larger meeting of minds on the three-letter acronym GST that's come to define every economic reform in India. Our top Congress sources are telling us that they're glad that 1% additional levy has been dropped. Dispute resolution will be decided by the council, and that is where the consensus is between the opposition on one hand and the government on the other. Of course, Section 279 entails that, and that language will be changed in the Constitution Amendment Bill. So that's the second demand. The third demand that the Congress party was very adamant on was the demand about putting a cap on the GST rate. The Congress wanted it in the Constitution. The government said there is no chance. The states were also up in arms against that move. And so the consensus on that one is, the compromise, if I say on that one, is that it will not be a part of the Constitution. It will be a part of the GST bill. So those are the three big demands. Those were three sticky issues. And it looks like consensus has been reached upon all of that. The fact that Rahul Gandhi said that a positive outcome is likely on the GST gives you a sense of how things are progressing in the right direction as far as the goods and the services tax is concerned.
Three-letter acronym, a lot of acrimony. So should we now presume that, the main opposition party in the government have sort of buried the hatchet? What's the word from the government camp?
So the government does believe that, and the fact that the government is looking to table the GST bill on the 2nd of August, which is Tuesday next week, gives you a sense that the government is confident. And if Finance Minister's statement to our very short and brief question was that I'm keeping my fingers crossed, is anything to go by, then the government is fairly confident that the bill will sail through. The Finance Minister has been having meetings with leaders across the opposition benches, whether it's the SP, the BSP, the TMC, or even the left. The Congress meeting has also happened. In fact, top sources in the government are telling us that there is no future need or further need for negotiations or talks with the Congress party because negotiations are largely on board.
Okay. And, last but not the least, you yourself mentioned about how the Rajya Sabha is going to debate this bill. So just how soon before this is going to be a reality? And do put it into perspective for us because, one would imagine that's actually the only beginning, because then there's sort of a long way ahead about states being on board and so on and so forth. So just how soon before this big bang reform really gets rolling?
I'm glad you asked me that question because many people think that with Parliament passing it, GST will be a reality. That's far from it. The Parliament will pass the Constitution Amendment Bill. That has to be ratified by 50% of the states. So half the states in India will have to ratify it, which is over about 15 odd states there. We've got 29 states, 15 of them have to ratify that bill. And then, of course, there will be a decision of the IGST, the CST, and all of that. The council has to sit down and decide on the thorny issues there. They still haven't decided what the rate will be. They still haven't decided about dual control. They still haven't decided whether 1.5 crore threshold of business is going to be in or out. So those are issues that have to still be debated and decided upon. And once that happens, only then will it become a reality. Is administrative preparedness required? Yes, a lot of it. It will entail an entire change of taxation in India. And so it can't be done any time in the middle of the financial year. It could perhaps be done at best on the 1st of April 2017. The question is, how soon will the states ratify it, and can it really be a reality by then? All right, I'm given to understand Mr. Sachin Menon is joining us live right here on ET Now. Thank you very much for being with us. Positive notes coming in as far as the GST is concerned from the principal opposition and also the Treasury benches. Are we going to finally see the goods and the services tax become a reality in the monsoon session of Parliament?
Well, I think that finally we are seeing the end of the tunnel, light in the end of the tunnel, and the political parties are slowly and steadily becoming more responsible. I think we can see that now the parties are putting the national interest ahead of the political interest. So hopefully, I think by Tuesday or Wednesday, we should have this bill passed in the Parliament.
Mr. Rajeev Dimri, I'm also given to understand, is with us. Thank you very much for being with us. it looks like differences have been narrowed down and GST is indeed going to be a reality. My question to you really is 1% additional levy gone, so there is going to be a level playing field, but the dispute resolution to be done by the disputants themselves, and that was the principal demand of the Congress party, and there seems to have been some meeting of minds there. Is that an issue that irks you?
Well, there has to be a dispute resolution mechanism, and either it gets done by the GST Council or an alternate mechanism has to be found. I would imagine, given the construct that we have outside of the court process, GST Council is indeed an appropriate body because every state is a member of that. And I think it has as good a chance of working as any other because some disputes may not necessarily be a court process. It could also be, extended negotiations of philosophy. So I don't find that necessarily something that is designed to fail. I think it has as good a chance of working as any other idea. So I think having it is better than not having it.
I have a very special guest also joining us. Please hold your thoughts there, Sachin and Rajiv. I've got Dr. Haseeb Dabru joining us on the phone line. Thank you very much for being with us. It looks like the GST will finally be a reality. I know the State Council, the Empowered Council of State Finance Ministers has met just a short while back, about 2-3 days back. But it looks like the Parliament will also indeed see the debut of the GST Constitution Amendment Bill and also its passage. Are you largely on board with what the Congress and the BJP seems to have arrived on, the large consensus there?
Well, as a part of the larger fraternity of states, I think the Empowered Committee has moved forward and been cooperative in trying to get the constitutional amendment through. I'm talking in terms of the entire Committee of States, leaving out J&K for the moment. So to the extent that the Empowered Committee agreed with substantial reduction in the rate without actually getting a rate in the amendment itself, I think was a big step forward, and that has narrowed down considerably the differences that existed between the principal opposition party and the government. So while I think I wouldn't say you've started the thing, but I think the countdown has begun, and post the Rajya Sabha thing, I think it will have to go back to the Lok Sabha because some amendments have been proposed now, including on the compensation, because earlier what was passed by Lok Sabha was that the Parliament may, by an act, decide on compensation. I think that has been changed to Parliament shall. So changes in the Constitutional Amendment will require it to go back to Lok Sabha, from what I understand. And then once it's done, then the onboarding of states to a GST Council, putting rates in place. I think a lot of work is required to be done, including framing of acts in terms of the Compensation Act itself. Who will decide, on what principles it will decide, and so on and so forth, including, as you were just mentioning, the dispute resolution mechanisms and stuff. But there are certainly still some apprehensions on part of the state governments, which as we go along should get resolved. I don't think anything is a deal breaker. I think we are on course for the Rajya Sabha to discuss and pass it at the moment.
My hair is also not done. Right. Dr. Dabru, I do have to ask you a question. I'm glad you mentioned, you've covered a large ground in your answer there, but I do have to ask you a question. That the thorny issues still need to be sorted out. The issue about deciding on a rate, I'm given to understand that in that Empowered Council of State Finance Ministers, the rate was discussed and 18% is not agreeable to most states. Is that a fair information that we're picking up at this stage? Is 18% a tad too low according to most states who were present there? And you'd like it around 20 to 21%?
Two rates of 15% and 18%. 15 recommended by the NIPFP and 18 recommended by the CEA. These numbers are in public domain. But as of now, each state has its own complexity of taxes, and what we are looking at on a rough back of the envelope calculation is a rate of anywhere between 27 and 28%. Now, to slash it down to 18% would also have complications for the government of India in terms of compensation magnitudes required. So I would imagine that the rate which ballpark I am, for instance, looking at, not in terms of being a finance minister, but as a policy analyst, I would look at a rate somewhere between 21-22%, which in some ways is in line with the decision of the Empowered Committee to seek a substantial reduction. Substantial gives some latitude for the rate to be fixed, and I think it's only fair that we have moved to a different system. There'll be a lot of issues that will come as we go into it to provide some headroom for policy maneuverability. So I wouldn't kind of say that, look, we are stuck on 18 or 22, but somewhere a band is required, and it's good that it's not a part of the constitutional amendment, because one of the values of constitutional amendments is that it should have the stay of time. Otherwise, you would alternatively have to change it every 3 years or 4 years. It's outside the amendment, and you would not need such a cumbersome process to change it. The GST Council will sit, talk to all the stakeholders, take the views, look at the policies, and then take a call on the R&R, as it was called, revenue neutral rate. So I would imagine it will be 18 plus something, and not between 15 and 18. It will be on the other side. And by and large, what you said is right, that states haven't agreed to an 18%.
Fair point indeed, and I'm glad you're making that clarification, because there were voices otherwise that were coming. I'm so glad you're clarifying that on ET now. But Dr. Dabru, I also have a question on the 1.5 crore threshold. The dual control is an issue that remains unresolved, still has to be worked out. Do you see the government given on that 1.5 crore threshold, that businesses with turnover of less than that or up to 1.5 crore will only be taxed by the state government, will not be under the domain of the central government?
I think it's up for discussion at the moment, and I think there is a fair. I think one of the things that you recognize is that whatever is being done today, in terms of give and take, both from the center and the states, is being done in good faith. So I think that's a very important point to recognize. So when you talk about 1.5 crore threshold, I think there's a lot of administrative merit in leaving below 1.5 crores of states. It's been minuted like that, not just in the Calcutta meeting, but earlier as well. And the formulation for above 1.5 crores, the mechanism has to be worked out. By and large, while I can't say there's an agreement on it, but I don't think that's going to be a deal breaker in case of these. These are small issues that will get resolved. Now, the numbers, pure administrative numbers that the central government will require to, enforce this below 1.5 crores is huge, and may not be desirable also. So I would imagine at that point, practical things in terms of who can best do it would determine what the threshold levels will be. So while Centre, I think, is seized of it, are aware of it, would probably walk an extra mile to allow this to happen for states to be on board. I don't think there's an agreement at the moment on it, but that will not be a stumbling block for the bill to be passed.
I'm glad you're making those clarifications, and I must congratulate the states that they've really come on board and are giving up a lot of their fiscal autonomy, their fiscal space, so to say, for a reform as big as the GST to come through. So I do laud what some of you are doing out there. But just hold your thoughts there, because I do have Mohammad Khan from the Congress party joining us on the phone line as well. Mohammad, thank you very much for being with us. It looks like there's a meeting of mind between the Congress and the BJP on this, some kind of conciliatory notes being struck on both sides, and looks like GST will be a reality. What made the Congress given on some of those very sticky issues?
Well, ma'am, as you summarized at the start of your show, the Congress had three concerns, and now the government has, in its wisdom, decided to accept the one which relates to the scrapping of the manufacturer's tax, the ill-advised manufacturer's tax, as we were suggesting. Now, we welcome this move, of course, and the Congress has always been supportive of a GST that works. I was listening to Mr. Dabru right now. There are still, what I fail to understand is, and the thing that the Congress has been trying to make other people understand, is this is not a pure GST. This is a fragmented GST. It has three components. It had four before they accepted the Congress's suggestion. It has exemptions in the form of petroleum, alcohol, and various other goods. And on top of that, when we asked them to prescribe a safeguard, we have met them halfway, and we've said, it's fine, you don't want to prescribe a constitutional safeguard of the R&R, then fair enough, ring-fence it in some form or the other. They refuse to do so. In fact, they name and shame us when we ask them to do that. So, as Dabru Sahab rightly pointed out, how are they going to guarantee that? How are they going to fix it to a ceiling of 18 to 22%? That remains to be seen. The other issue that is of grave concern to us is the Dispute Resolution Council. It is mired in contradictions, as we have been saying. You are taking away the state's power to tax, the constitutional power of a state to tax. But the fact is, you're giving it to the Dispute Resolution Authority. But the state sits in the Dispute Resolution Authority. So if there's a dispute, the state becomes a judge in its own cause. That itself gives you a situation that is riven with conflict. These are concerns that are valid, were shouted down in the name of being obstructive and so on and so forth. We still feel this is not the best GST that can exist. We feel this is a deeply flawed GST. And we have changed our position. We have been urging these people, go ahead. You have the numbers. You've declared victory. Go ahead and pass the GST. Go ahead. But let me assure you, there seems to be a certain degree of it doesn't seem to us that these people are sincere about passing this current bill. And if they do pass it, they do realize that implementation will be very hard, which is why they're trying to find ways to delay it further and further. If there is a problem at this stage, let me assure you, ma'am, and your viewers, that it is not the Congress party.
All right. Neither the Congress nor the BJP wants to be seen on the wrong side of stalling the GST, and I'm glad you've clarified that, Mohammed. But Dr. Dabru, if I may bring this to you, and the point that Mohammed did make about ring fencing, and that's the new parlance that we are using here, thanks to the Congress party, ring fencing that rate. If I may throw an argument that Mr. Chidambaram made a couple of days back, and he said GST is an indirect tax. It's regressive in nature. The rich and the poor pay alike, and which is why a cap was warranted. It may not have been a part of the Constitution bill, but it needs to be ring fenced somewhere. Is that a flawed argument according to you, or does that really find favor with you?
Well, if you were to go back 3 years in time, then Mr. Chidambaram was the one who was doing it. I mean, why are we now finding all these things which all parties who have been in power at some point, that GST has been in the discussion for the last 13 years. It's not something we discovered today. And now, I don't think it's anybody's contention that you should not have a rate. The only discussion is, do you need a rate in the Constitution amendment or not? And I don't think it requires to be put in there. For the simple reason, because constitutional amendments should be few and far between. And if you start putting rates up there, you will have a difficulty in changing it when you may want to do so. So it is also depending on a number of other things, which include what are the trends of inflation, what is the level of growth, and what is the composition of production, what is the structure of GDP. So that is not something that is given for all times to come. It changes on a dynamic basis. So if you were to look at it from that perspective, I don't think a major shift has been made by keeping it out of the amendment and putting it into a law. And that's something that we formulated. It's quite possible that you actually have the formula for working out an R&R across states, a kind of a uniform rate. Whether it gets fixed at 18 or 20, broadly, policymakers have a sense of where it will kind of sit. Now, to put an exact number to it, right now, thwarts the whole consensus on it. And it's worthwhile to keep that part out of it. Look, if you want to resolve the issue, let us first talk on what we agree on, rather than what we disagree on. If you start looking at what we disagree on, it will never get passed through. I think everybody recognizes GST is a better system. How best to implement it in a federal country like this, I think it's substantial. Over the years, not just now. It has taken 12, 13 years. I think with every passing year, it has been made better, but let's not make the best the enemy of the good. Whatever we have today needs to be put into a framework. Today, the compulsion is to get it past the language of the amendment, and then these issues can come. And because it has been passed, then the potential for it, purely from a pragmatic negotiating point of view, are far less, and you will kind of see a consensus built on it as we go along. In terms of the rates, I keep saying that it's not fixed on 18 or 20 or 20. That will emerge with consensus of the states, and states, by and large, see the benefits of it, especially the consuming states. And we would, I would say the empowered committee was very confident of being able to arrive at a rate that is a substantial reduction, yet keeps the level and trends of tax revenues of both central and state protected for what it is now. I think that's the way I would summarize it.
Fair point. I also think the two takeaways from what you said is that let best not be the enemy of good. But Mohammed, if I may come to you, and please do stay with us, Dr. Dabru, because it looks like politicians across the spectrum, whether it's you or whether it's the BJP, depending on which side you sit, is the stand you've taken on this legislation, because politicians across the spectrum have constantly stalled this legislation. I mean, Mr. Modi stalled it as the Gujarat Chief Minister. He's now pushing it as the Prime Minister. The Congress calls themselves the original authors, stalled it for a while. But Mohammed, if I may ask you a politically uncomfortable question that some of your detractors are now beginning to say, that the Congress fell in line, or the Congress is willing to give a go-ahead because the numbers don't stack up in their favor, even though I believe that the government would not have put a legislation as big as the GST to a vote?
Well, ma'am, to those people who take that position, we say the following. We say that they could have accepted our terms and conditions during the last session. They did not. They delayed it till now. And there is no change in our position, regardless of our numbers. We continue to tell them, by all means, go ahead and pass the GST if you can. But the fact remains that there is a certain degree of reluctance on your part, which you are then pushing on to us and calling us obstructive. We are not changing our position. Our position is the same as it always has been. We believe this is a deeply flawed GST. It has too many exemptions. There is the government has, as it does often with many of its schemes, overestimated the benefits in this case. And you rightly pointed out there were many flaws with the Congress's bill as well, and we jumped to point those out. We say that we were trying, as you said, let the best not be the enemy of good. And we were in the process of arriving at a bill that was free, that would achieve the objective of harmonizing and consolidating all these fragmented taxes, while at the same time having a certain degree of benefit for the common man as well. Now, when we try and debate with these people, we tell them that, look, if you don't guarantee, if you don't cap the rate, then you cannot guarantee that the common man will indeed will indeed have to pay less than he is currently paying. They then tell us that no, the purpose of GST is not entirely to reduce taxes, but to streamline the process, to remove octroi, central excise, so on and so forth, and to make sure that there are no leakages, losses to the state and to the central government. Well, that is where they differ from us in what we believe is the objective of this law.
Right. Dr. Dabru, because I asked a politically uncomfortable question to Mohammad Khan from the Congress party, I'm at equal liberty to put you in a spot as well. This GST to begin with will not have petroleum, will not have alcohol, will not have electricity. Do you expect any of this to be inducted into the GST at a later date? And at what stage do you envisage that happening? Because India is going to be one India, one tax, that uniform market that we talk about, only when some of this does get in.
Yeah, of course. I mean, one would expect that these things would get into the ambit of the tax regime. I mean, it's not that you are substituting a tax, you're changing the tax regime. And all of it can't happen at one stage, because you have to also realize how federalism has been practiced in this country. I mean, for the last 60 years, you have had a share of taxes, which initially started off by saying that you shall share and you may share. And the center never shared the May taxes, number one. Number two, forever and ever, surcharge on income tax was raised, which was not shareable. Duty was raised, which was not shareable. So there has to be a certain level of comfort which the states have with the center, that they're not being, shortchanged in any way. So as we go along, and as I said in the beginning, I think all these things that are being done today, some give and take is happening all around. It is being done in good faith. States need to build comfort. I think there's a lot of apprehension which states have. What essentially has happened in the GST is not so much loss of fiscal autonomy. It's a pooling of tax sovereignty. And while states have pooled in 66% of their autonomy or sovereignty, center has pooled in 33%. Fact is that there needs to be a comfort and enough buoyancy in these taxes where the tax revenues of the states do increase, and makes it a much cleaner system. As we go along, the benefits, once the technology is in place, once the systems are in place, once the administration is in place, you would tend to see it's a far better system, and inclusion of other items and giving up octroys and all that would perhaps be how it will move to a situation of being a more comprehensive, a better harmonized GST. So you start off with, because you are also talking of 29 state governments at different levels of collection, different levels of taxation, getting into it can't happen overnight. You can't wake up, you can't sleep in a VAT regime and wake up in a GST regime.
That's indeed true. You can't be sleeping in a VAT regime and waking up in a GST. But thank you, both of you, Mohammad Khan and Dr. Haseeb Dabru, for being with us and analyzing the political impact, the politics over the GST, and how that is perhaps moving in the right direction. India will perhaps see this legislation if politicians do allow ourselves to. But thank you very much, both of you, for being with us. We take a quick breather here on ET Now. We come back with plenty more that you need to know about markets, economy, and the world of business.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/ETNow.